Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to this evening's events. Let's call it events. Not too sure what our presenter's going to give us this evening, but whatever it is, we'll all be going away a little bit wiser. So let's have a look who's in tonight. We've got about 14 people at the moment, so it's looking good. It's nice and early, so we can get started on time. So good evening, Graham H. I must admit I did see you pop in there, and I think it was nearly the scenario where you brought your towel, you threw it over the chair to get that front seat, so good on you. Evening, Jill. Who else have we got? Doreen. Good evening, Doreen. I'm presuming that Jan will be excuse me, Jan will be with us this evening, Doreen. So frog in my throat. Good evening, Sue. Welcome this evening. Who else have we got? Jim. Good evening, Jim. Welcome to this evening's talk. Who else have we got? Michael. Hi, Michael. And Alan. Good evening, Alan. You're outside sunbathing with the iPad. Oh no, it doesn't say that. Evening, Caroline. Bob. I'm sure you've got a pint of the brown stuff at side of you, Bob. Usually you have, and a refill at half time. So who else we got? Viv's just popped up. Good evening to one and all. So that's it at the moment. As I say, the numbers are just slowly building up, so we'll just give it another few minutes before we start the introductions, etc. Hope it's been warm enough for you today. I've just been having a little pre-chat with David, and he was saying that he had to do a little journey in his car today, and it was showing over 40 degrees, so it certainly has been a warm one. It certainly does get you in the cars, that's for sure. What did we do before we had aircon? Something heck. It was wind the windows down, get the sunroof up. Caroline just popped in, Caroline Steele. It's Dave and Caroline, both of them again. Good evening to both of you. You're getting some great images there, Caroline, with the 30-day challenge. We shall have to look into that next year and see if we can't do something as a club. So it certainly makes you go out and get the pictures, and lets everybody else share them as well on the both the website and the Facebook page. Make sure you do get a few across to Bob on the website, because of course you've got some cracking images there, and the difference between you and anybody else is that you actually know what all these things are, whereas other people don't. So who else has popped up? Hi Diva, welcome to you this evening. Some of us haven't got aircon. Yes. I'll not say no more because I don't want to upset you too much, Doreen. So evening, Tony. Welcome to this evening's talk. As you all know, this evening's going to be David Smith from Olympus, and David's going to give us a coverage of various bits and bobs. It's not that I can't tell you exactly what David's doing, it's that I don't know what he's doing exactly. We've discussed it in brief, but not in detail. So whatever it is, as with David when he came along to the club to us, it'll certainly be an entertaining evening, so there's no doubt about that. So it hope that you can all hear me okay. If somebody can just let me know. It's strange actually, because I usually say that, can somebody just let me know if you can hear me, and I usually get 4 or 5 replies because, of course, you're all set in different places. So, yeah. So, hi Tony, head better yet? Right, we'll not say no more about that. He's either been drinking or he's got a headache. So, we'll just leave it at that. Open the window. Yeah. Right, what we'll do, I know it's a bit early, but I'll just say 1 or 2 things just up to the 7 o'clock. Welcome to you all this evening, and as you know, we're going to be entertained this evening by David Smith from Olympus. I'm just going to reveal the young gentleman just so that you can see him waiting for us there. So he's got himself all ready. He's psyched himself up, and I'm just looking where the full screen. Enter full screen. There you go, David. We can now see your full screen. And hi, just say hello to the last couple that's popped in. Hi, Michael. Welcome to you this evening. That's Michael Hughes. So I am going to pass over to David because he can do his own introduction and give you a little bit of whatever he wants to say, really. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to David. You've got plenty of people saying hi, David, on the chat here. So I'm going to pass it over to you and I'll ask you some questions. Oh, just before I do hand over, anything that you want to know, make sure that you ask David through the chat and I will relay it to him. I'm sure he won't mind being interrupted as we go along. So, you know, do make sure you drop those questions in. If you don't ask the questions, you're not going to get to know. So please make sure that you ask. Good evening, Peter. Just see you've popped in there. So over to you, David. All yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Graham. And good evening, everybody that's watching. Thanks for coming along to see me. Hopefully, some of you remember me from when I was up at the club in person. Seems such a long time since I've been able to do that, but hopefully very soon we'll be able to come back and physically see everybody. Thank you to Graham for asking me to come in this evening and spend some time with you as well. What I thought I would do is just give you a sort of quick run through of where Olympus is at in terms of the products that they've got available and the kind of funky features and technologies that we're currently using. And then I was going to talk a little bit about my favorite topic in photography, which, as some of you might know, is macro. I absolutely love macro. Always have done since the start of my sort of photographic journey, which is about 25 years ago now, and gone through various different bits of kit to do my macro photography. But now, having landed on Olympus, then I have some really, really good features and technology to help me do that. So I was going to talk a little bit about that, give you a little bit of a demonstration of some more kind of improved macro features instead of single shots, and kind of look at focus stacking and things like that. And I'll talk about focus stacking in general, not just applying it to the Olympus cameras, because I use a certain piece of software that helps me also stack the images as well outside of my camera. Show you some pictures. But more importantly, this evening will be the best for you if you do ask those questions like Graham's asked. I'm more than happy to be interrupted at any stage, whether it be through the initial presentation that shows the Olympus products, whether it be when I'm talking about an image or the tips and things that I give out for macro. I give workshops every day on Zoom, and I don't see any of my attendees on the screen, so they have to shout at me and say, Dave, I've got a question. So I fully expect that Graham will do that on your behalf. He will take in the questions and shout, hey Dave, and I'll stop what I'm doing and we'll talk about what you've asked. Hopefully it'll be an interesting evening for you all. I'm glad that Graham has said that you'll give me a break, because I'm not sure in my old age that I could sit here for 2 hours and not need to run to another room very quickly, so I appreciate that. Now, it is very hot today, as some of you have already been saying, it is absolutely sweltering. I do have a fan going on in the background that's just keeping me cool enough to talk to everybody, and Graham's assured me that you can't hear that on the audio. At some stage, I will need to turn it off, though, to do the demonstration, because it will blow all my macro things everywhere, so you'll just have to excuse me while I do that. But other than that, that is my intention for the evening, and hopefully that's going to be all right with everybody else, and hopefully that's all right for you as well, Graham, as an introduction for what we're going to do.
Yep, no problem whatsoever. If you aim for wherever you please, from 10 to 8 to just after 8 for your break, whenever it suits you.
Perfect stuff. Okay, would you like me to go ahead and start looking at some of the things that I brought in for the evening?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Stuff. Okay, so hopefully all the technology will work as we cross over. I'm going to try and share my presentation with you all here. So bear with me 1 second while I do this, and you should all now be able to see. I'm not sure how Graham's feed is going. I think I'm in the corner. We'll soon see as soon as everything catches up on YouTube, but this is now going to be the presentation that I'll go through. And again, please do stop me with your questions. Get them to Graham on the chat, and then he'll ask me anything that you've got on the way. Okay, so brilliant stuff. I can see, yes, you can still see me. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry you can still see me. It's not the greatest part of the presentation. So let's just have a little look at where we are with Olympus. Okay. So we've got our Olympus mirrorless lineup, okay, a fantastic lineup of all mirrorless cameras, which means that we've taken all of the moving gubbins out of the cameras, reducing the weight, reducing the size, and increasing the speed and the application of better technology. So we've got here our EM1 series, which is the top level of our cameras. It's considered our Pro series with EM1, EM1X. We've got our EM5 series, which is our kind of intermediate, semi-professional, heavy enthusiast. And then we've got our EM10, which is kind of a travel range, a beginner's camera, very small, very lightweight, but packed full of features. And I'll tell you a little bit more about all those as we go along. So, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So, just to start off at the beginning for mirrorless cameras, not the beginning for Olympus, because that was nearly 100 years ago. The beginning for cameras in digital for Olympus was 2003. This is where it all started to really happen, where 4/3 as a system was born. So this is the predecessor to the micro 4/3 system, and there was a lot of world firsts that came with that. We've got the world first dust removal system, which is a way to clean the sensor every time the camera is switched on and off. Telecentric lens design, which ensures sharpness edge to edge, and that's very key for the micro 4/3 system as well, in the sense that our lenses are telecentric. 16 years ahead of the competition at that point in 2003. The E system was the world's first removable lens with a mount and imaging system specifically designed for digital. It wasn't a crossover challenge from film to digital. It wasn't a compromise from film to digital. It was specifically designed for the digital age. And then all the way through, we come to 2008, 2009, when Micro 4/3 was created. And this was created jointly with Panasonic as an open source lens format, so that people could build Micro 4/3 lenses without the need for license. Okay, and that has resulted in truly huge numbers of lenses being available for the system. The fully digital future of mirrorless was almost a decade before other camera manufacturers, and what Olympus did was create a system and an ethos around mirrorless that lots of other manufacturers then took to produce their own. And in 2012, the EM5 was born, and it captured the hearts of semi-pros. And the EM5 was pretty much a revolution in the OMD and mirrorless range. If it wasn't for that camera, we wouldn't be where we are today. It was our first 5-axis stabilized camera, and it was the start of many, many good things to come. We proved what was supposedly impossible by making it possible. So the technology that we use to create the 5-axis stabilization is based on magnets. So very much like how the Tokyo bullet train levitates on its tracks to achieve speed, we created a magnetic system that levitates the sensor within the camera, and that crossed across the 5-axis of human movement. Lots of awards for the EM5. So best camera, DPV review, first, second, and third was Olympus, Nikon, and Canon in that year. So it was a good sign of things to come as well. And 2013 brought the EM1, which truly brought professional quality and a professional want to the system, with breakthroughs in the autofocus. The on-camera, on-sensor phase detection was one of the biggest things that changed the series, because phase and contrast detection systems then became much, much quicker. Weatherproofing that we already had on the EM5 was then upgraded for the EM1, and world-class weather sealing is still on all of our products. In 2016 came the EM1 Mark II. It was another revelation, possibly one of my most favorite cameras in the whole range. Definitely the camera that I've taken most of my recent favorite pictures on in the last 4 years. And it is a no compromise camera. So you've got the full weather sealing, you've got the lightweight, you've got the strength of the body, which is a magnesium alloy, so nice and strong, and very, very fast. So even in slow mode, the low sequential burst mode on this camera was achieving 18 frames per second. And we also implemented something called Pro Capture on this camera as well. And Pro Capture is a feature designed to enable you to not miss a shot. It's like a time machine feature that captures images backwards in time until you press the shutter, and that can shoot at up to 60 frames per second. So it's super fast technology that came up with that. The Zuiko lenses have always been a legacy of ours. They're legendary icons in the lens industry, and Zuiko Gloss continues to be fantastic products. This is the 40-150 f2.8 Pro, which is one of my favorite lenses, and also one of the lenses that I do still shoot bugs on, that's not a macro lens as well. Incredible close focusing, beautiful 2.8 aperture all the way through, and completely weather sealed, again complementing the whole system when combined with an EM5 or an EM1. The 300mm f4 Pro is a very, very sought after lens as well. Built-in stabilization that synchronizes with the body. This helps you to achieve up to 7 stops on some cameras of stabilization, which ultimately would allow you to shoot handheld up to about 6 seconds, which is crazy times to be hand-holding a single shot. And then we developed the range in total. So we have a holy trinity of lenses. We had the 40-150, the 12-40, and the 7-14, which was the holy trinity of lenses covering a wide range. The 300mm very much niche right at the top there in the telephoto end, but these 3 lenses, if you're an Olympus owner and you've got these 3 lenses, you have got everything that you need to go forward. Except the macro lens, which is something that we're going to come on to later. Again, one of my most favorite lenses, but it is still weather sealed.
Just to interrupt there, David.
Absolutely.
Could you just explain to those members that are not too sure, you've just put up on there, for instance, the 300 prime, but of course, as we who have Olympus knows, that's not 300 on this system. Can you explain to them why, what for, when and how?
Yeah, absolutely. And a very, very good question as well. So there is a conversion that we need to use in order to understand what the focal length of Micro Four Thirds lenses is when compared to old money or 35mm standards, okay? So because of the distance, the flange distance, which is the distance between the sensor and the rear element on the lens, because that is so close in comparison to a DSLR distance, then the focal length effectively changes. So a 300mm or any other lens in Micro Four Thirds terms, to become its 35mm equivalent, we have to times that by 2. So the 300mm f4 Pro from Olympus is the equivalent of a 600mm f4 on a 35mm camera. So that's the distance that you're going to achieve at that focal length equivalent. So same with everything else. We have our beautiful 12-40 2.8 Pro. That in effect becomes a 24-80 equivalent. And it's a really nice, simple equation to do, just 2 times for the focal length. And I know some of you do that already if you've got APS-C cameras where you're timesing by 1.5 or 1.6 to get the 35mm equivalent. But with Micro Four Thirds, ours and Panasonic lenses, it's nice and easy. We just times it by 2.
Great, yep.
Okay, lots of amazing photographers. This is Jari Peltomäki. There's a fantastic wildlife photographer using the Pro system, getting some incredible, incredible shots. Now, I'm not sure, I don't think I've got him on this presentation, but somewhere a bit closer to home, we have the absolutely amazing Andy Rouse, wildlife photographer using the Olympus system as well. And I know that he's very, very active during this kind of really strange times where we're Some of us are still locked down, and some of us are able to get out and about. But Andy Rouse is being very, very active on social, giving lots of talks and lives, and he's using the Pro system as well. So there you go. That is the showcase video for the top of the range EM1X. Now, I know it might have been a little bit stuttery on your side. I think that's just the way the feed comes through and the bandwidth works. But ultimately, when you can make a 3-minute video about a camera's features, then that's pretty impressive. Excuse me. So that is our top of the line. Let me come on to that particular product.
Can I just interrupt you there a minute?
Yes, of course.
We've got one of our members, Paul. Sorry, Dane was first. If he wanted to use a Canon 100-400 with an adapter, do they work well together? So can he put his 100-400 onto the Olympus system and it work okay?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dane. So yes, you can. If you get the Metabones adapters, there are various adapters out there. Obviously, some are better than others. You are going to be able to use it very, very well on an Olympus body. There will be some features that you can't use, but then a lot of those are specific to Olympus lenses anyway. So things like Pro Capture only work to their highest degree with Olympus lenses. So you may miss out on a couple of things like that. But ultimately, in terms of generalized shooting, yes, if you get a good adapter, you are going to be able to use your 100-400 on there.
Great. Another one from Paul. Because you're using an electronic screen as the viewfinder, what does that do to the battery life? How many shots per battery charge cycle?
Another good question as well. So previously, this would have been quite a problem. Back in the day, the lithium batteries for mirrorless cameras weren't very big because the bodies were quite small. The battery technology wasn't superb, so you could probably only achieve, I would say, if you're thinking about 6 years ago, you would be only achieving somewhere around 300 shots per battery. Things have changed dramatically in terms of battery technology, the size of the battery, and the way that they work with the cameras now. And because of that, to give you an example, on my EM1 Mark II, I would, from a full charge battery, probably achieve close to 1,000 shots per battery. So it's still pretty good. The batteries are superb as well. So we have fast charge batteries that charge in under 2 hours.
Yeah, I think, and I think you'd agree, David, it does have an effect of how you have the camera set up on the rear screen, the viewfinder, etc., etc. It can just take it down a little bit, or you can make it better.
So the thing to remember as well is, if you've come from a DSLR background, which I have, then you will come from an optical viewfinder, which if you've got the screen off, the back screen, and you're using an optical viewfinder, then nothing is using any power. But if you move from a DSLR background to a mirrorless, you may forget that that viewfinder is an active monitor in there. So if you put your camera down by your side on a strap, you forget that the viewfinder is still active. So you may walk around for 30, 40 minutes with it still active by your side, not taking pictures. So it's just about changing your kind of your actions a little bit and remembering that you have got an active viewfinder in there. If you're going to walk on and remember that you're not taking photos for a while, is you do need to turn your camera off, whereas before I just used to leave mine on all the time and walk around with it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay, so the video that you saw was of the EM1X. That really heavily explains all of the features in there. That is the top level camera, and it is quite a large camera for Micro Four Thirds, and it was developed specifically with a certain user in mind, a user that wants that body form factor, that wants the fact that it contains 2 batteries, that wants the fact that it has GPS, sat-nav location data, field sensors, and all of that other stuff in there, with a combined extra focusing system that is subject detection. So that's the very top one, but the most common one that the pros will go for is the EM1 series, and the most recent iteration of the EM1 series is the EM1 Mark III. Now I have an EM1 Mark II and a Mark III. They both feel and respond in exactly the same way, but there are some quite major differences in the Mark III that lead me to using that one more. So it is a very6small camera. So if you look at the difference here, we're showing you a diagram of what would be the equivalent of a 600mm lens attached to a DSLR body, overshadowed on top of this EM1 Mark III with a 300mm. So there's a huge weight difference. 1.9 kilos is the weight of that combined total setup. So very light. The image stabilization has been improved massively on each iteration of the camera. We get more and more stabilization. We put a new gyro sensor into the EM1 Mark III, which was developed for that big EM1X. The body IS now allows for 7 stops of movement, and that's physical movement across 5 axes, the way that you hold the camera. If you combine it with a lens that has synchronized IS in it, which is the 12-100, f4 or the 300mm f4, they both have IS built in as well. They synchronize with the body to give you another half a stop, up to 7.5 stops as well. Okay, so this is a good example of a handheld shot with image stabilization off on our cameras, on, and this is a 4-second handheld shot. And I can vouch for the fact, and I'm sure there are actually many users in the club who use Olympus cameras that can vouch for the fact that you can shoot at these much slower shutter speeds, which is really handy for a couple of reasons. One, if you forgot your tripod, it's great to have. 2, if you want to bring that ISO level down, then you can reduce your shutter speed and then balance that out with a much lower ISO. And 3, it just means that if you go on holiday and you have a few too many gins the night before you go out shooting, then you're generally going to be all right and supported by your camera. I don't encourage having too many gins, of course. That's a personal choice you'll have to make. So, 121 points. All the AF points in the AF system are cross-type. which means that not only do you have all of those lines that cross over for the grid, but you also have a further 4 intricate cross-type points within that, and that's doubled up with the phase detection. So phase detection is a newer form of focusing than what would be the standard of contrast detection, and the EM1 Mark III series and the EM1X uses both phase and contrast for super fast focusing.
I'm going to just ask a personal question, David.
Yeah, of course.
I never really, of course, I understand the contrast focus system, but when they use the wording phase, I know it's better, but what is phase?
So phase detection, in the most simplest terms, it's the way that our eyes see the world. So we see and we detect phase by seeing things, and we can detect and judge distances quite well with our eyes. And the camera will use phase detect in order to detect the distance that light travels and how quickly it travels in order to make the focus finer. So, and it's better than contrast detection, because in terms of contrast detection, the focusing system has to physically go beyond a point of contrast to then come back to know that it's hit it. So the focusing system will travel until it sees the point of contrast, go a little bit further to know that it's gone out of focus, and then come back. Whereas phase doesn't do that. It simply measures the speed of the light traveling and hits the point of focus straight away. So it's just a much quicker system in that way.
Right, yep, thank you.
Okay, so in your EM1 series, same as EM1X, you've got 18 frames per second tracking, so that's using the low burst mode. So our low burst is actually pretty quick. So in continual autofocus tracking at 18 frames per second. In single frame lock, which is a locked off focus sequential shoot, you're going to get 60 frames per second. And both of those figures will transfer into the Pro Capture feature as well. They put a new imaging processor in there, so this is the TruePic 9, and that's obviously allowing for things like the 50 million pixel handheld high res, which is another great feature of these cameras, to do the handheld high resolution shots from what is a 20 million pixel sensor, which is probably something that you were wondering what it was anyway. 20 million pixel sensor on all of the current Olympus range. 3 of those cameras can do the 50 million pixel high resolution shot, and one of them can do it handheld. And 2 of them can do 80 million pixels high res on a tripod. So this is huge amounts of detail that you can get from these cameras. Live neutral density, that's a brand new feature that came out with the EM1X and is now also on the EM1 Mark III. And this is a digital version of ND filters. So the ND filters that you would put on the front of your lens to be able to slow your shutter speed down and achieve longer exposures for things like water and such like. There is now a live digital version inside an EM1 Mark III and an EM1X that operates up to ND32, which is 5 stops of light being stopped going in there. Pro Capture, one of my favorite features. I don't necessarily use it for wildlife. I actually use it for splash photography with water, but it was designed for wildlife, and it enables the camera to collect a series of images. On the EM1, it's up to 35 images before the user presses the shutter button. So we maintain a half push to focus on our subject, and in all that time the camera is buffering images in real time before you fully press the shutter, at which point it then captures those images back in time and moves forward with a selection of other images that you've programmed in. So ultimately it means that you can't miss a shot, because if you press the shutter button after an animal like the bird here had done its thing, the camera had already selected 35 shots before that anyway. And that's all in RAW and JPEG with no blackout in the viewfinder. And there we go. You can see there that you can pick out the image that you want. M Zuiko Pro lenses. So M stands for the micro of Micro Four Thirds. Zuiko is the lens brand that's been around for 80 years. And Zuiko is a very, very big name in glass. We have some superb lenses. And as you can see there is a big white lens, which is still to come. This is the lens that's currently in development, and we expect to see it at some point this year. Even with COVID-19 pandemic, we are hoping it's still going to be here. And the Pro series of glass is all weather sealed. So it matches an EM1, an EM5, or an EM1X body as well. This is the 50 million pixel handheld high-res shot. Really, really fantastic. Camera takes up to 16 images by shifting the sensor and collecting more data in between the photo sites. So in between each pixel, there is more data. It is microscopic data, but as you shift the sensor, you can collect more of that. And you actually then achieve a much better ISO rating as well. So you get better noise performance out of it. And then, of course, you've got focus stacking and focus bracketing, my favorite features. The camera can automatically stack up to 15 images in camera, made up of a series of images taken at different focal points across the subject, and combine them into one image with a greater depth of field. And for macro photographers, that is the dream, because when we're shooting macro, we have very little depth of field to work with because we're so close and we're so magnified that one shot could give us about 2 millimeters, sometimes less, of depth of field. So to be able to stack up to 15 images in camera and create more depth of field is an absolute dream. You can also move on to the next point, which is something that I'm going to show you later, and that's focus bracketing. And again, it's an automatic process. You just give the camera a starting focal point, and it will automatically bracket up to 999 shots across the subject, which you can then take in RAW and implement them into your preferred focus stacking software. And again, I'll give you a quick demonstration of that later on. Please feel free to ask any questions about that. As much as I know huge amounts about the Olympus cameras and their features, macro is one of my specialist areas, as is portraiture, both studio and street, and light painting as well. So any of those subjects come up, you feel like you've got a question to ask, feel free. If you feel that it doesn't apply to Olympus cameras, don't worry. If you just want some tips in those areas, then feel free to ask me. And that brings us on to another of my favorite features. This is live composite, live bulb, and live time. So previously in my DSLR years, I would be using bulb on my camera to do long exposures, and predominantly that would be things like star trails, light painting, even light painting portraits and things like that. But bulb is a very tricky feature to work with on any camera because we're doing it blind. We don't know what's going on behind the lens on the sensor until we've stopped the final image. So you either need lots of experience in that area or lots and lots of patience. Now, live time takes that to a different step. So in Olympus cameras, they've all got a feature called live time, which is basically bulb photography, but with a live preview of how that long exposure is developing on the back screen. So you can see exactly where your exposure is and you can stop it when you're ready. Live composite takes that an evolution even further, and that enables you to stack a set shutter speed of time on top of each other live, so that the whole image as you see it there does not overexpose over time, but any moving light within the image, such as the fireworks in the background, will be displayed perfectly exposed. So you could run this shot for 3 hours and that dark sky and those dark buildings and the dark water would remain the same, and any other light that was introduced would appear magically in the scene. And again, that's all. You've got the ability to shoot all that in RAW as well, and it is one of my very favorite features. Live ND, as I discussed, live neutral density filters without taking extra filters. Now, you can use extra filters on top of them, but if you wanted to go light one day and you just wanted to take what you had, then you could use live ND for things like streams and rivers, as you can see there.
On the live ND, David.
Yes.
When we see the numbers, as we can see them on the back there, and it's the same with an ND filter for any of the members who want to use them, they always refer to it as ND2, ND4, which I originally thought it meant 2 stops.
Yeah.
So is it equivalent to a stop, ND2, or is it equivalent to 2 stops?
No, so ND2 is equivalent to 1 stop of light. ND4 is equivalent to 2 stops of light. ND8 is 3. ND16 is 4, and ND32 is 5. So the ND numbers double every time, but your stops only go up in 1s.
Right. Yeah. So for a 10 stop, you've got a big number on the ND side.
Yeah, so if you've got a 10 stop, then you're going to be looking at
64.
128 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So grip systems, this handling is one of the main things. Now I've got one of the cameras here. I've got an EM1 Mark III. It's attached to a Pixie Pod because I've just got it sat on my desk here. But ultimately, the grip is what is most important to me now. When I was shooting on DSLR, I had major problems because I've got quite a bad back problem anyway, and that's got worse as I've got older. I know what you're saying. It doesn't look a day over 21, I wish. But the back is a big issue, and it was one of the main reasons why I switched out of DSLR. And for me, grip is very, very important to be able to balance that grip. And I never, ever have a strap on my camera unless I'm running events. And if I do an event, I have a black rapid strap that goes across the front. Otherwise, I'm always free holding my camera, and some people might go, that's really dangerous. And it probably is, but it's the most comfortable way for me to hold it. And the grip system on the EM1 series makes it even easier. So I literally have that. I've got 3 fingers that can balance my camera, and I don't actually need to be gripping it at all. And it feels really, really comfortable. So that's one of the biggest kind of push points on the design of the system. So the wear sealing, you have over 60 seals across the Olympus system cameras, backed up by what you can see there, which is a magnesium alloy chassis underneath. So super hard, super durable, but super light. USB charging in 2 of the cameras. So, well, actually in 3 of the cameras now. So in the EM1 Mark III and the EM1X, you have USB in-camera charging. You can also use a USB power delivery compliant device to not only charge it, but also use it and be operational. So you can have it plugged into a power bank that's in your pocket and carry on using your camera, click, click. The EM5 Mark III was given USB in-camera charging, but you can't use a PD device to operate it at the same time. So you just need to switch it off, plug your power bank in, and let it sit there and charge. But that's a nice jump forward for a lot of cameras. The supersonic wave filter was an invention of Olympus. It was the world's first, and we designed it for the E-series. And what that means is that when you switch your camera on and off, the sensor is made to vibrate somewhere around 60,000 times per second, and that throws any microscopic dust off your sensor. And the durability of the shutter is for up to 400,000 actuations. Now, those of you that already own an Olympus camera, I get asked the question a lot of times, does the electric shutter count towards shutter actuations? No, it does not. Mechanical shutter actuations only within that 400,000. Your silent shutter or your electronic shutter doesn't have any sort of wear and tear on it whatsoever.
On that one, David,
yes.
When we use things such as the focus stacking and etc., how many of these features automatically go over to the electronic shutter automatically without you doing it?
That's a very, very, very good question. So features that automatically switch into electronic shutter are the high-res shot, focus stacking, focus bracketing, and to a certain degree live composite, but it's an open shutter system, so it means that the shutter is open and then the electronic shutter is permanently active on that as well. So you're looking at high res, focus stacking, pro capture, as well as an electronic shutter feature, so because that's constantly gathering information.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Excuse me. So dual card slots, you've got 2 card slots in your EM1 series, which is EM1 Mark II, EM1 Mark III, EM1X. The top slots on the EM1 Mark III is UHS-2 compatible, which is the very, very fast speed, up to 300 megabytes per second write speed. Now, if you're going to be doing things like pro capture, really, really fast work with wildlife and tracking, then we obviously do recommend, I personally recommend that you get a UHS-2 high-speed card. And remember to check the write speed and not the read speed, because some of the cards are sold to you and it will say 300 megabytes per second, but that would actually probably be the read speed, so it's important to check which one you're looking at. You do have the ability as well, just going back to that, to transfer copy to copy. So in the EM1 series, you can copy from one memory card to another, so you can completely take all of your pictures from card 1 to card 2 if you need to do backups. It's got the joystick or the multi-selector, which helps you to quickly shift through your AF areas, and it also helps you to navigate the menus if you want to as well. This is a brand new feature that's only available on the EM1 Mark III, and I used it myself a couple of nights ago. We had a really, really clear sky. And it's something called Starry Sky AF, and it's a focusing feature that is chosen as you would single autofocus or continual autofocus, and it only becomes active in dark conditions. So you can select it, but if you try to use it in the daytime, nothing will happen because the camera is looking for super dark areas that it can boost and use both the contrast and phase detection systems to grab the sharpness of a tiny pinprick of a star in a very, very dark sky. And it's a phenomenal feature that I've seen huge amounts of users post pictures using during the lockdown period of things like the Milky Way. We've developed the phase priority now as well. So phase priority is improved. Tracking performance with that is dramatically improved with the new processor. You've obviously got the video options. So not all of us are into video, but for those of you that are into video, we've got handheld 4K movie shooting from full HD up to 4K, and then also cinema 4K. So we do that little bit extra. And the image stabilization system works across all of the video modes as well, which is a superb additional bonus.
Just on that one, David.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always thought about why not do everything in 4K video and frame grab.
Because you get a reduced resolution. So,
Right.
for example, there are some companies out there that will say you can do 4K image, which basically means it's done a 4K video and it's going to grab an image from that. Now, on a 16 million pixel sensor, your 4K image grab is going to be 8 million pixels. So there is a reduction in that.
Yeah.
So then if you obviously go to a 20 million pixel sensor, then you can do a 10 million pixel image grab. And you can do a 4K image grab on the OMDs as well. All you've got to do is take the video and then select options and grab image.
Right.
But it does cause a reduction in your resolution.
Yep.
Because I hear a lot of people saying that, why don't we all just go around shooting 4K video and pulling the images off? And it's just not quite the same.
Well, I was thinking that.
We could just all run around making videos and then extracting images, but no, we don't get as much resolution. So keeping on the video stuff, we've got something called OM log. Now, if you're into your videos and you're into editing, you want to shoot flat, profile, or in log, what you can do is initiate OM log 400. What you'll get out of that is the grayscale image that you see there. And then that can be then processed and graded in the high performance editing suites to become really beautiful video footage, as you can see on the right. Lots and lots of ability for color correction. The HDMI clean output. This is fantastic. It's something that I'm going to do with you guys today. I can plug in my camera, I can feed it through HDMI output into an external recorder for the top of the camera for video. I can use it for teaching, which is what I do anyway. I plug the cameras into a big screen or into Zoom like this, and we transmit through the HDMI. So it's a really nice bonus to have a HDMI output. Equally as well, if you're just shooting macro at home and you've got a television with a HDMI input and you want a bigger screen to view what you're shooting on macro, you can set up your camera, put a HDMI cable between the camera and your television and see a nice big HD image of your live view. I find that really useful as well as time goes by and the old peepers don't work as well. So that brings us out of the pro range and into the semi-pro or mid-range. And this is the current iteration of the EM5, which is the Mark III. So EM5 Mark III, again, 121 cross-type phase detection points, phase detect and contrast, of course. A choice of grid options from single 5, 9, 25 and all 121. You can change the AF sensitivity. You can use a center start and center priority AF. And the low light performance is down to -6 EV with one of the pro lenses. So that's basically focusing in the dark. 5.5 stops of stabilization in the body, and 6.5 if you apply one of the IS lenses, which, as I said before, is the 12-100 or the 300mm f4. This is a beautiful example of the improvements in noise reduction and ISO performance for the EM5. So the image on the left is the new EM5 Mark III at ISO 6400, giving a cleaner image than the previous EM5 Mark II at ISO 1600. So there's some major jumps in the noise performance there. Organic LED viewfinder in there, 2.36 million pixels, 100% field of view with a 27mm eye point. And a lot of people wonder what that means. It means that if you are like me and occasionally you do have to wear glasses, and I can't actually find my glasses, which is going to be a problem later on. I'm sure they're somewhere. Probably left them out in the garden, to be honest, because I was shooting a video out there and the cat is probably chewing on them as we speak. But the eye point at 27mm means that if you wear glasses and you lift up the camera to your eye, is much more comfortable and you will achieve a better view with that. And incredibly, it doesn't affect people that don't wear glasses. So it's a nice advantage for that one. They've added bulb mode onto the dial. So previous features on the camera like bulb and lifetime and things like that, you had to go through the manual mode and sort of squeal through the shutter speed until it got to the slowest point, and then it would cross over into bulb, lifetime and light composite. And now we put that directly on the dial. It's much quicker and much easier to get into. You get focus bracketing in the camera like you do with the EM1. You get focus stacking, but that's limited to 8 shots in camera. You don't have a choice on that, whereas in the EM1 series you choose between 3 and 15. So EM5 Mark III users, EM5 Mark II users as well, you get a set 8. You can't change that. Pro capture as well, that one's limited to 14 shots before you press the shutter, whereas the EM1 series is not. It's limited to 35. And you can only do a tripod-based high-res shot on here for 50 million pixels. I'm not quite sure why my presentation says 50 megabytes, because it should be 50 MP for million pixels. You do also get in-camera fisheye compensation for the 8mm Pro fisheye. Very small, very light, 366 grams in body only. And I believe I have got one loitering around here. Oddly, it does actually have one of the bigger lenses on it. So this is an EM5 Mark III with the 40 to 150 lens on there. But as you can see, so that's an 80 to 300 millimeter equivalent lens, 2.8 all the way through, fully weather sealed, one finger. It really doesn't weigh much at all, even with that big lens on there. And beautiful in legacy silver as well. You can get it in black if you want to. Like I said, USB charging via power bank. For some reason, they've felt the need to tell us that we could do it through a cigarette lighter socket. So if you are out in your car, you can use one of those, or through USB AC adapter. Sorry, Graham, did I feel like you had a question for me?
Well, I was just writing something down, and it was just back to a couple of slides ago. You've no need to go back, but the one with regards to the noise on images, because of the technology with Olympus and such things as composite, you don't have to have long exposures, so you do save getting noise in a long exposure, etc.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, are the sensors, and I know this may go straight over the top of the heads of some of the members, but are the sensors invariant or variant?
That's a great question, but I feel like it might be only you that wants the answer to that. As far as I know, there are invariant sensors. Invariant.
Yes, right. That's fair enough.
But going back to what you said about noise and long exposures, yes, because you've got things like live composite, which stack a base exposure. Without going too much into the nitty-gritty of it, what you would normally need to do is take a huge amounts of longer images for the star trails, whereas what live composite does is it restricts that. So for example, if you're taking a 10-second shot in live composite and letting that stack every 10 seconds to capture all the star trails, your ultimate image will only ever result from 10 seconds of noise. Even if it takes 4 hours to complete that star trail shot, you'll only get 10 seconds worth of noise because that's the stack value.
Yep, thank you.
Okie dokie. I'll do a quick time check. Okay, no, we did pretty well for time. Fantastic stuff. Moving on. EM10 Mark III. So this is our entry-level / travel companion. Okay, so if you've got an EM1 or an EM5 and you love the system, you love the way it works, but you want something a little bit smaller and lighter to take away on your jollies, then this is a really good one. Ultimately, if you're just coming into photography or you've been in it a little while and you're just coming to the system, it's a great beginner's camera. It allows you up to full manual control, as do all the other cameras. It's just worth bearing in mind that the EM10 series isn't weather sealed. So it's small, light and luxurious design with enhanced ergonomics. It's a really lovely thing to hold. Now, I have one down here. I do not have one down here. That's interesting. Normally I do have them to hand. You do get the 5-axis image stabilization. You get the built-in Wi-Fi, as you do with all of our cameras now. There is a redesigned user interface, so it's been made much simpler, hence why it's a great beginner tool. And you've got that lovely 2.36 million OLED electronic viewfinder. 4K image support, 121 point AF, just like the rest of the cameras, but the shortcuts and buttons are much easier to handle because they've got printed designated functions on them, which the other ranges don't. A scene mode. So if you just really need to get somewhere quick, we've got the scene modes in here, so you can choose between things like nightscapes, motion, sport, close-ups, things like that, and you can go straight into them. And there are scenes within scenes as well, because we know that not every nightscape's the same, so you can choose for different scene modes. We've got an advanced photo mode, so some of the more advanced features that you don't need to go digging around in a menu for like you would for EM5s or EM1s, and you can just pick them from the top dial. So by going to AP mode, you're presented with this visual menu on screen showing you these images, asking you which ones you want, and things like focus bracket and lifetime are in there as well. Just makes it really nice and simple and quick for either beginners or, like I said, for holidays. And if you enjoy Olympus products, if you have them and want more, or if you would like to get into the system, then for the next 4 days, you can enjoy our Club 2020 discount code, which will give you 10% off any Olympus purchase from your preferred retailer or our online shop. Like I said, there's a couple more days on that. So if you had something on your bucket list, or if by the end of this you were an Olympus user and you've seen me using a 60mm and you really want one, then feel free to run around with that code, Club 2020, and get your 10% discount. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation now, because that is the end of the Olympus product section. And I can hear some of you going, finally, and I can hear some of you going, oh, really? We want more. But either way, that is the end of that particular part that I was going to do for you this evening. Just checking the time. We've got a few minutes before we want to take that little break. I'd be really keen to take any questions that anyone has either put in the chat, or if you think, Graham, that some things have come up that I may well have not answered that you obviously know about in the system already.
Yeah, I think you have covered it very, very well. And being a user myself, as you know, with the M1X, I've got to say it is a super system, and I've had it now a year. Doreen, as you saw earlier, she was possibly the first one to have the system.
Oh, excellent. So, Doreen, we can blame it all on you for everybody getting into it in the club.
It's Doreen's fault that you've made a lot of money out of us.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. You're keeping children in chicken nuggets and waffles. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was that we do also have members with virtually every one of the cameras as well. So Fantastic. It's not just myself with the M1X. We've got M2s. We've not got any 3s yet. So we're welcoming the use for the club of one for a year free of charge. You know, that would be great.
I shall ask the question and see what can be done.
but no, you have now got from the start of all of this, I think we're now, and there's one or two of the ladies can tell me, but I think we're up to about 10 to a dozen members with the Olympus system, all with varying lenses and varying cameras for their needs.
Well, that's really, really good. That's such good news. The thing that I always like to say about the system is that it was designed from the ground up for digital. It's got some superb features. It is not the easiest thing to switch from a non-mirrored system, or from any other system for that matter, because menus are always different. But it is exactly the same as driving a right-hand drive car for your entire life and then moving to a country that only sells left-hand drive cars. It is something that you get used to, and then before long forget that you even didn't know how to do it. So it's about perseverance to really kind of benefit from those features. But it's a phenomenal system that just keeps giving. Perhaps before the break that is going to happen imminently, Graham, would you like to tackle a question that you felt may or may not have come up this evening?
You're putting me on the spot now. I personally do quite a lot of night photography, and you can possibly help me in convincing me that I shouldn't take the Canon out anymore and I should take the Olympus out, because I am still just finding that the noise level in the Olympus is just a little higher than what the Canon is. Granted, I've got a camera in the Canon that's nearly 3 times as much money in the body, but after saying that, I am generally using all manual settings on the camera for night photography for it, and I know 1 or 2 of the other members do night photography. Is there a and I know you do night photography, is there a best setting, say aperture or shutter or manual or any specific, that you could help us with just to get going a little bit better on the night photography when we're light painting the buildings, to as a starter setting?
Of course, yeah. So the thing with the night photography is there's a couple of different things that you need to look at, and there's ultimately a post-edit part of it as well. So in terms of the light painting of the buildings, I do just recommend live composite, because you can set your ISO level at what you want. You are base stacking an image over a period of time. So if you want to shoot at ISO 200 and paint a building, shoot at ISO 200 and just increase your base shutter time. That's basically going to give you so much more help, because we don't need to be out there shooting at ISO 1600, things like live composite. And that's one of the major benefits of the system over anything that doesn't have live composite, is because we don't have to shoot at those ISOs. Obviously, lenses and aperture ratings are really, really important. So it's good to remember that if you shoot wide open because you're shooting a nightscape, you're also incurring refraction, and sometimes noise is mistaken seen, and it's actually refraction, or a part of it is refraction. So if I go out and shoot some night light painting with my 12 to 42.8, I will not shoot at 2.8 just because it's nighttime and I think I need to draw all the light into the camera. I'll probably shoot at f3.5 because it moves me away from that widest aperture point, which is where physics creates that refraction. And if you add refraction into a higher ISO rating, then you're pretty much asking for trouble. And the same applies if you're shooting at f22 with a higher ISOs. You really are asking for trouble. So I always shoot a little bit away from my widest possible aperture. So 3.5 on an f2.8 lens, or recently I've been shooting on the 17mm 1.2 but at f2, and that works very, very well. And it's just moving away from those ultimate extremes. All your lenses, whether you're Canon, Nikon, Olympus, Panasonic, Fuji, all of your lenses have a sweet spot, and it's good to get close to that. Now, if you're shooting longer exposures, you have the benefit of you don't absolutely need to have it wide open for most of it. Now, if you're shooting the Milky Way or something like that, yes, you're going to want to crank that open as much as possible. But the potential is that you're only going to be taking up to 10, 12 seconds of a shot in terms of your ISO and your noise. So that'll back that up anyway, and that applies to all cameras, including Olympus. But just look at whether or not you need to shoot it wide open for light painting or for nighttime landscape or for nighttime architecture and things like that. Ultimately, when you come to the back end, it's about the post-editing. Different post-editing software will result in different noise reduction in your image. So I personally, I'm not keen on the noise reduction through Adobe products, but I really like the noise reduction on Capture One. And Olympus Workspace. So if I'm doing any major dark stuff, major light painting or really, really dark stuff where I've had to really trump the ISO, about 2 months before lockdown, I shot a Battle of the Bands competition, which is in a dingy pub with all sorts of mixed lighting, and I was shooting at 3200 ISO most of the night. I knew when I shot that I'm processing it in Capture One, not in Lightroom. Whereas certain things I will shoot and capture and process in Lightroom. So it's a big balance. Different RAW files react differently. So just because Lightroom can process a Nikon file or a Canon file nicely with higher ISOs, doesn't mean it can do it with an Olympus or a Fuji or a Panasonic. And you'll notice that there's actually good evidence to show that editing software creators have realized this, because Capture One have released specific versions of their software for different manufacturers. So there's a Capture One Sony version, there's a Capture One Fuji version, because they've realized that there are certain profiles that apply to these specific RAW files. And that's something to just bear in mind and take into consideration. Just because this processing method worked with your DSLR files doesn't mean it's going to work with your mirrorless files.
Yep. A couple of questions just come in. One from Paul, and I do believe Paul is a non-user. I don't mean drugs neither. He says, what are the real pros and cons of Micro Four Thirds?
Okay, it's a good question, Paul. So the most obvious pros are the weight of the system. So carrying around, and I'll be flat honest with you, I used to use a Canon 5D Mark III with some pretty hefty lenses. I have a spinal compression, which means any weight that I carry downwards causes massive problems in the nerves, in my back, in my leg, and it was one of the reasons why I had to come away from SLRs. Moving to a mirrorless system, any mirrorless system in general is going to reduce the weight that you carry, and that is both weight in bodies and glass. This lens that I've got on here, the 40-150, is the equivalent of an SLR lens that would be this big, because it's a 2.8 constant aperture, and it would be much fatter as well because of that. So it's about the lightweight, it's about the compact size, it's about taking the camera on carry-on on flights if you want to, because it is small enough. It's about being able to take one bag with a camera and 3 or 4 lenses in it over your shoulder rather than a rucksack. So that's one of the main things about it. Beyond that, you get the mirrorless technology that can't be done when there's a mirror box in the way that needs to be moved up and down. So you get things like the speed, so the frames per second, the fact that these cameras can now operate, 18, 20, 60 frames per second in terms of a burst. And then you also get these advanced features like live composite, like the electronic shutter features like Pro Capture. So it's about the advancements of features. More features means more photo opportunities. If your camera's lighter, you take it with you more often. And all in all, that creates the pros of it. Now, in terms of cons, it's very difficult for me to find a negative, because I found that my photography developed so much after dumping the heavy gear. And because of the features that I use within this particular mirrorless system, I'm taking better photos. Probably one of the cons that most people would bring up would be battery life in some of the other models. Now, the EM1 series battery life is actually really, really good, but it's still not going to match that of a DSLR when you think about the fact that it's powering 2 screens and a huge amount more tech. Now, I know somebody did mention about turning Wi-Fi off, but generally speaking, if you're using the camera, the Wi-Fi is not on. You do need to think about GPS in the EM1X and making sure that's off if you want to preserve battery power. But I think in terms of cons, you do simply just have to think about that. Some people might also bring up the argument for depth of field. Okay, so when we're looking at lenses, let's say a 45mm 1.8, in terms of light, that drags in f1.8's worth of light. It's exactly the same as any other system of any other size. But in terms of depth of field, it's actually double. So your f1.8 becomes nearer to f3.5 in terms of depth of field. So people say when they're shooting portraits, they don't feel that they're going to get that same shallow depth of field, that lovely creamy out of focus background. Whereas actually it's not that bad to achieve, because a lot of Micro Four Thirds lenses can focus a lot closer to the subject. And by doing that, you're increasing the compression of the background, and you can actually achieve that in different ways. But if I was an outsider and I was to bring up cons, I would probably say battery life, and having to work a different way to achieve very shallow depth of field without buying a £1,000 f1.2 lens. But I can achieve superb depth of field on a 45mm 1.8, which is 200 quid.
Yeah. A couple of other things that just popped up. We've just had a couple of members who have bought the M5 Mark III as well. So we're getting into a few members with the M5. In fact, we've had 3 that's just bought those. Also, Graham, our treasurer, has just put he's just discovered the noise reduction on Workspace.
Yes.
Only works on RAW, but,
yes, it does.
But it works extremely well, and there's 3 levels of it. So yeah, we've got no more questions at this stage, so we'll go into a break and we'll come back at 15:15.
Excellent
So
stuff.
for
Yeah.
all of the members, we will see you at 1:15, and I'll shut off for now, and we'll come back. If you could be back for about 10 past, and then we'll start at 1:15.